The train did not stop for long, and neither did her doubts. Sophia May Thompson stood on the wooden platform of Redemption Gulch, clutching her worn reticule and trying not to show the shiver running through her. 6 weeks of endless rails, of rattling carriages and hollow faces passing by in the dim lamplight of the stations. This was supposed to end in relief. Instead, the town around her looked like it had been carved out of loneliness and left to bake under the Montana sun. The signboard leaned at an angle, its paint weathered by years of wind and snow. Redemption Gulch. Pop. 142. Sophia breathed deep. The air was sharp with pine and dust, the kind of air that cuts straight through corset stays and polished shoes to remind you did not belong. Boston's damp sea breezes felt like a lifetime ago. Jedediah, the station master, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of soot. He was a lanky man with a drooping mustache, and he eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and pity as he hauled her trunk down with a heavy thud. "You the mail order for Thorne?" he asked, not unkindly. Sophia smoothed her traveling dress, stiff, with dust. "I am. Is Mr. Elias Thorne here to meet me?" Jed squinted down the empty track that passed for the town's main street. "Not like him to be late." He scratched at his jaw, uncertain. "Tell you what, my boy's taking the supply wagon out that way. He'll see you safe. Thorne's place is the last stop on North Creek Road." Sophia's hands tightened around her reticule. Her letters from Elias Thorne had been few and terse. 300 acres, cattle, the need for a wife. No promises of affection, only the stark outline of survival. It had been enough. A future, however unadorned, was better than the ruins of Boston, the whispers, the lies, the dismissal that had left her without a reference or a name worth hiring. "I thank you," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. An hour later, the wagon jolted and rattled along a road that was more suggestion than path, the wheels finding every rock and rut. The boy driving it said little, flicking the reins nervously as if he felt her unease. Sophia gripped the seat, watching the horizon bleed into jagged mountains. At last the valley opened, and the Thorne Ranch came into view. A creek split the land, glittering in the afternoon light. The house was plain but sturdy, hewn logs with a stone chimney, smoke curling upward in lazy promise. Yet as the wagon drew closer, that promise frayed. A fence rail lay broken in the dirt. The water trough was bone dry. The front door hung ajar, creaking gently with the breeze. "This is it, ma'am," the boy muttered, pulling the horses to a halt. He looked as unnerved as she felt. "Want me to wait?" Sophia hesitated, then shook her head. "No, thank you." He turned the wagon sharply, dust swallowing him as he left her alone before the silent cabin. "Mr. Thorne?" she called, climbing the 3 porch steps. Her voice felt small, swallowed by the sweep of mountains. "Elias, it is Sophia Thompson." The only answer was the sigh of wind through the pines. Inside, the air hit her, stale whiskey and something metallic, thick and unsettling. The cabin was dim, the single window shuttered. A fire smoldered in the hearth, shadows clawing across the log walls. The main room was sparse but orderly, table, 2 chairs, shelves of books. Yet her gaze was pulled to a half-open door at the back, from which came a sound, a low guttural groan. Her heart thudded. She pushed the door wide. The smell of blood thickened, choking. On a rope bed lay a man, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, quilt tangled around him and stained deep brown at the middle. His face was ghostly pale beneath a tangle of beard and sweat. His chest rose and fell in ragged, uneven breaths. Sophia's training as a governess had included nursemaid duties, fevers, scrapes, broken bones. But this was something else. She crossed to the bed before she could think better of it, her practical instincts shoving fear aside. The quilt clung to the wound. With a careful hand, she pulled it back. Her breath caught. The crude bandage, little. More than a torn strip of cloth, was soaked through, bright crimson seeping still. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. "Elias, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, revealing startling blue eyes clouded with pain. They fixed on her briefly, confusion swimming in their depths. His lips cracked open. "Water," he rasped. Sophia scanned the room. A bucket sat near the door, nearly empty. She found a dipper and coaxed what little remained to his lips. He drank greedily, coughing, some of it spilling down his beard. "Who?" he croaked. "I am Sophia Thompson, your bride." For a heartbeat, his expression twisted, disbelief, perhaps despair, before his eyes rolled back, and he slipped into unconsciousness. Sophia froze, the enormity of it crashing down. She had crossed a continent for a husband who might not live to see the morning, alone, miles from town, no help to summon. She could turn back, run, beg Jedediah for passage east, accept a life of servitude and shame. Her gaze fell on Elias. Again. In his stillness, the hard lines of his face softened. The calluses on his hands, the scar above his brow, the broad shoulders, all spoke of a man who had fought to keep this place alive. Someone had meant for him to die. Sophia looked at her own hands. Soft hands, bookish hands, but steady hands. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. She rolled up her sleeves. "All right, Mr. Thorne," she whispered, voice hardening into resolve. "It seems our partnership begins here. You are not dying today." She searched the cabin, mind racing through every scrap of training, every memory of her grandmother's remedies. She needed hot water, clean cloth, courage. The wedding could wait. The resurrection had to begin now. Night did not bring peace, only fever and the smell of blood. Sophia lit a lantern, its glow casting trembling shadows across the small cabin. Her hands shook only once, when she peeled away the sodden bandage and saw the wound beneath. Jagged. Ugly. No clean cut of a knife or bullet. This was the mark of something heavier, crueler, an ambush meant not just to wound, but to break. Her stomach churned, but her mind sharpened. She remembered her grandmother's stories of moss packed into wounds during the war, of herbs used when doctors were far away. Somewhere in this cabin, Elias Thorne had prepared for survival. She searched shelves, drawers, a narrow cupboard. And there it was, a bundle of dried herbs, yarrow, chamomile, willow bark, a small mercy. The kettle hissed on the fire, steam rising. She tore strips from a fine linen shirt, one she had packed for her new life as a respectable wife. Now it would serve as dressing for a stranger's torn flesh. She worked methodically. Boiled water cooled to warm. Soap stung her fingers as she cleaned the wound. Elias thrashed in delirium, muttering, his voice a rasp of broken fragments. The creek. Blackwood. Damn you, Blackwood. Sophia pressed the cloth firm, whispering in tones meant for frightened children. "Hush now. You must be still. I'm helping you." Hours blurred. Fever climbed. She brewed willow bark tea, forcing drops past cracked lips. She packed yarrow into the gash, bound it tight with linen. Sweat poured from him. His whispers grew frantic, then fell silent, his chest heaving shallow and weak. Sophia sat in a chair pulled close, dabbing his forehead with cool cloths. She prayed without words, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of his chest. Every ragged breath was a battle, every pause a terror. Toward dawn, his fever broke. A wave of sweat drenched him, his body slackening into real sleep. Sophia slumped in the chair, tears burning her cheeks. Exhaustion claimed her at last, head bowed beside the bed. The next 2 days were a test of will. She found the well and drew water, hauled it bucket by bucket. In the barn, a placid milk cow greeted her with low complaint. Sophia clumsily filled a pail, boiled the milk, drank it herself, and spooned small amounts into Elias when he stirred. Hunger gnawed, but survival allowed no indulgence. She foraged near the creek, finding wild onions, greens, Her skirts grew torn, her shoes caked in mud. But she endured. She changed his dressings twice daily, each time relieved to see the angry red lessen, the wound edges begin to knit. On the third day, she was mending one of his shirts by the fire when his eyes opened. Blue eyes, clear this time, focused. "You're the woman from the train," he said, voice weak but steady. Sophia set her sewing aside. "Sophia Thompson?" "Yes." He tried to sit, gasped, and fell back against the pillows. "Easy," she said quickly, hand firm on his shoulder. "You've been very ill. You have a deep wound in your side." His gaze flicked to the bandage, then away. "I remember, falling. My horse spooked." The words were strained, uncertain, like a lie he wanted to believe. Sophia shook her head gently. "That wound doesn't look like a fall. And in your fever, you spoke a name. Blackwood." The clarity in his eyes darkened, a shutter closing. His jaw clenched. "Silas Blackwood, neighboring rancher. We disagree over water rights. Nothing more." The denial was too sharp, too fast. Sophia knew better than to press. He was still weak. "Be that as it may," she said evenly. "You must regain your strength. I found oats. I'll make you a gruel." By week's end, an uneasy truce had formed. She nursed him with quiet efficiency. He accepted, grudging but grateful. Pride warred with need each time she helped him drink or sit upright. Yet his eyes followed her as she moved about the cabin. He saw how she kept the fire burning, how she tidied his shelves, how she tended the cow and checked the fences. She was no timid bride-to-be. She was surviving. One afternoon, as she helped him sit to, eat, their hands brushed. A jolt passed between them, sharp, unexpected. Sophia pulled back, her face warming. Elias's gaze lingered, something new dawning there. "Why did you stay?" he asked, voice low, searching. Sophia smoothed her apron, refusing his eyes. "It was the practical thing to do. You were in no condition to be left alone." "Another woman would have run," he said. It was no accusation, just fact. Walked back to town, boarded the first train east. "I am not another woman, Mr. Thorne," she replied, finally meeting his gaze. "And I did not travel 2,000 miles to turn back at the first sign of trouble." For the first time, a smile, crooked, weary, but real, touched his lips. "No, I see that you didn't." That night, trouble arrived. Hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Two men dismounted, rough-looking, pistols heavy at their sides. One, burly with a cruel smirk, hammered on the cabin door. "Thorne, we know you're in there. Blackwood wants a word about that fence by the creek." Sophia's heart raced, but her face hardened. She opened the door just enough to block the entrance with her body. "Mr. Thorne is indisposed," she said, her Boston accent crisp. "As glass," the man sneered. "And who the hell are you?" "I am Mrs. Thorne," she lied, the words tasting strange on her tongue. "My husband will not be disturbed. State your business, and I will relay it when he is able." The man barked a laugh. "Mrs. Thorne, is it? Didn't know Elias had it in him. Lady, this ain't your concern." He shoved forward. From the bedroom, Elias's voice roared, savage and strong. "You lay one hand on her, Dooley, and I'll kill you where you stand." The yard fell silent. The man froze, lips twitching, eyes darting between Sophia's defiant stance and the dark doorway behind her. He spat in the dirt. "This ain't over." They mounted and rode off, dust trailing. Sophia shut the door, trembling. Against it. Elias's voice, raw and protective, still rang in her ears. He had called her by name. He had defended her, and something inside her shifted, permanent as the mountains around them. Morning came with silence too heavy to trust. Sophia woke stiff in the chair by the fire, Elias's rifle resting across her lap. She had not meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had won. The cabin was still, save for Elias's steady breathing. Relief washed through her at the sight of his chest rising and falling. She eased the rifle back onto its rack. Outside, the yard lay gray with dawn mist. The creek whispered beyond the pines. But the memory of last night's pounding fists lingered. Proof that their isolation was no protection. Blackwood knew Elias was weak. He would not wait long to strike again. When Elias stirred later, his face pale but his eyes sharper, Sophia brought him water. He studied her over the rim of the cup, his expression unreadable. "You stood in the door," he said finally. His voice was rough. Gravel dragged across wood. "Alone." She set the cup down. "Would you have preferred I let them in?" A faint smile touched his lips, though it did not reach his eyes. "No, but it could have cost you." Sophia folded her hands tightly in her lap. "So could staying here. So could everything I've done since stepping off that train." His gaze lingered, and she thought she saw respect there. Reluctant, but real. That day marked the beginning of Elias's slow recovery. He forced himself upright more often, shuffling a few painful steps with Sophia's help. His pride stung at the weakness, but necessity won. Each time she steadied him, each time he leaned on her, something fragile yet binding grew between them. In the evenings, Sophia cooked what little they had. Porridge with onions, milk boiled and cooled, flatbread made from oats and wild greens. It was meager, but they ate side by side, the silence between them gradually softening. One evening, as the fire crackled low, Elias asked suddenly, "Why Montana? Why me?" Sophia hesitated. The truth was raw and bitter, but she had no talent for lies. "Boston ruined me," she said, eyes fixed on the fire. "A scandal not of my making left me without work, without family. Your letter was not romantic, Elias Thorne, but it was honest. Land, work, a place. That was more than I had," he grunted, shifting in his chair. "You deserve more than hard ground and a stubborn man." "Perhaps," she allowed. Then her gaze met his, steady. "But I came here for a life built on truth. Not whispers, not pity. I will take hard ground over false ground any day." For a moment his eyes softened, the firelight catching the scar at his brow. He looked at her like a man seeing something he had not expected and could not look away from now that he had. The truce between them deepened. Sophia's hands grew calloused from work she'd never done before, hauling water, chopping kindling, tethering the milk cow. Elias, impatient with his slow recovery, began teaching her, sometimes gruff, sometimes patient. "This land doesn't bend easy," he told her, guiding her hand as she tried to saddle a restless horse. "And neither do the men who want it. Blackwood won't stop." Sophia met his gaze, chin lifted. "Then neither will we." The words surprised them both. Elias studied her a long moment before nodding once. Their lessons were practical, survival pressed into her like ink on paper. How to balance in the saddle for long rides, how to mend a fence so cattle wouldn't scatter, how to listen for shifts. In the wind, that meant storm. But the most jarring came one afternoon when Elias brought her the rifle. "You'll learn to use it," he said flatly. Sophia recoiled. "I have never—" "You will." His tone allowed no space for refusal. "If I'm gone, if they come back, you defend yourself. You defend this place." Her hands shook as she gripped the heavy stock. Elias stepped behind her, adjusting her stance. His hands, rough and calloused, covered hers. His voice was low, steady. "Don't fight it. Become part of it. Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull." The shot cracked. The recoil jarred her, but the tin can on the fence post spun away. Sophia gasped, half in shock, half in triumph. She turned to him, and in his eyes she saw not just instruction, but pride. That night, as the wind howled outside, Elias sat sharpening a knife by the fire. Sophia mended a shirt, her needle flashing in lamplight. For the first time, the cabin felt less like a stranger's space and more like theirs. But the peace did not last. Near midnight, Elias stiffened. His head turned toward the window. Sophia froze, following his gaze. Outside, a shadow moved near the creek, then another. "They're here," Elias whispered, rising despite his wound. Sophia's blood went cold. She grabbed the rifle without thinking. A voice carried from outside, low and mocking. "Thorne, come out and talk like a man." Sophia glanced at Elias. His jaw clenched, his face pale with effort, but fierce with resolve. "Stay behind me," he ordered. But Sophia's grip on the rifle only tightened. The knock at the door was not a request. It was a threat. Sophia froze, her hands clamped tight around the rifle. Outside, two silhouettes shifted against the moonlit yard. One of them, the burly man from before, pounded his fist against the wood again. "Thorne! Blackwood says the creek's his by right. You don't answer. We make sure you regret it." Elias, pale and straining, had forced himself upright on the bed. His jaw was set like stone, sweat beading on his temple. "Don't open it," he hissed. But Sophia had already stepped forward, rifle cradled across her arms. Fear burned hot in her chest, but something fiercer cut through it. Defiance. She opened the door just enough to face them. "I told you before," she said, her voice calm though her knees trembled. "Mr. Thorne is indisposed. This land is his, and you have no business here." The men sneered. One stepped closer, his boot grinding into the dust. "Lady, you talk big, but Thorne's half dead and you don't scare me." His hand twitched toward his revolver. From inside, Elias's voice cut like thunder. "Dooley, touch her, and I'll put you in the ground, even if I have to crawl there myself." The words hung heavy. The men faltered. They knew the weight behind them. For a tense moment, silence ruled. Then Dooley spat in the dirt, muttered, "This ain't over," and swung into his saddle. The two rode off, their hoofbeats fading into the night. Sophia shut the door, her back pressed against it. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Elias's voice, hoarse but fierce, carried from the bedroom. "You handled them." She looked at him, his eyes blazing despite his weakness. "We handled them," she corrected softly. The next morning, the tension lingered like smoke after fire. Elias insisted on moving from his bed to the chair near the hearth, stubbornness written into every wince. "You can't keep pacing that wound open," Sophia scolded. "I can't sit idle while Blackwood circles," he snapped back. "That's how men like him win." Sophia didn't flinch. "Then teach me. You can't fight him alone, but you can teach me to fight beside you." His eyes locked on hers. For a long, silent moment, she thought he'd refuse. But finally, his shoulders eased, and he gave a sharp nod. "Then you'll learn what it means to be a rancher's wife." Days fell into rhythm. Elias's strength returned in increments, first leaning on a crutch, then walking slowly across the cabin. He showed her how to hitch a team, how to ride a ridge without spooking cattle, how to judge the sky before a storm. He was relentless but fair, and Sophia met him step for step. One afternoon, he led her to the barn, where the rifle and a smaller pistol waited. "You'll fire until it feels natural," he said, tone leaving no argument. Sophia swallowed hard but obeyed. The weight of the pistol felt strange, unnatural in her hand. She missed her mark more often than not, frustration mounting until she wanted to fling it into the dirt. Elias stepped close, his hand steadying hers. "Don't fight it," he murmured, his voice low. "Breathe with it. Become part of it." Her next shot rang true. The tin can flew from the fence post. Sophia lowered the pistol, chest heaving, a fierce smile breaking through. Elias grinned, pride flickering in his weary eyes. "There. You're dangerous now." She laughed, breathless, and for a moment the weight of fear lifted. But Blackwood's shadow lengthened. 2 days later, Elias returned from checking the creek with mud on his boots and fury in his eyes. "He damned it," he spat, slamming his fist on the table. "Built it upstream. Starves our land to feed his." Sophia's stomach sank. "Can you tear it down?" "I'll tear it down if it kills me." He left before dawn with an axe slung across his shoulder, returning long after dark, exhausted, mud-splattered but victorious. Sophia bathed his bruised hands, silent but proud, yet the victory was short-lived. A week later, they found cattle scattered across the ridge, calves lost to coyotes, a deliberate act of sabotage. Elias's rage grew cold, tight, and dangerous. He won't stop until he takes everything, Elias said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sophia laid a hand on his arm. "Then we don't let him. We fight smarter, not just harder." Her words held. But the storm was only gathering. That night, as rain pattered against the roof, Sophia found herself staring into the fire, the silence thick. She could feel Elias's gaze on her from across the room. Finally, he broke it. "Why did you stay?" His voice was quiet, stripped of pride. Sophia looked up, startled. His eyes held no hardness now, only raw searching. She set down her sewing, her throat tight. "Because I did not come 2,000 miles to run. Because you needed me. And because—" She faltered, then steadied herself. "Because I believe this place is worth saving, that you are worth saving." For the first time, his face softened fully. He reached out, calloused hand trembling. She hesitated only a moment before placing hers in his. His grip was strong, anchoring, and when he spoke again, his vow carried the weight of mountains. "You saved my life. You stood against my enemies. From this day forward, Sophia May Thompson, I swear, you will never stand alone. No one will take you from me. Not Blackwood. Not anyone. I will never let you go." Sophia's breath caught. The words were not courtly, nor romantic. They were raw, fierce, final, and she knew in her bones they were true. The storm broke not in the sky, but in their hearts. For days, Elias's vow echoed in Sophia's chest like a steady drumbeat. He had promised to never let her go, not with honeyed words, but with fire forged in hardship. And though she had never asked for such a vow, part of her found strength in it. Their partnership shifted after that night. They no longer moved like two strangers bound by paper. They moved as one, side by side. Elias insisted on chopping wood again, his face pale with strain, but his pride unwilling to yield. Sophia scolded him, but when he caught her hauling buckets, "Twice her size," he scolded her back. "You're stubborn as a mule," he muttered. She lifted her chin. "And you're no less." Despite their barbs, there was warmth in the words. A rhythm had taken root, yet Blackwood did not give them rest. One morning, Elias found the creek slowed to a trickle. Blackwood's dam stood rebuilt, stronger this time. He tore it down with the axe until his arms trembled, rage fueling each swing. 2 days later, smoke rose from the northern pasture, a fire set deliberately, consuming precious grazing land. Sophia and Elias beat it down with wet sacks until their hands blistered. They returned to the cabin exhausted, filthy and hollow-eyed. Elias paced the floor like a caged wolf, his voice a growl. "This has to end. He'll bleed us dry a little, at a time until there's nothing left." Sophia set aside the shirt she'd been mending, her voice steady. "Then stop reacting. Start acting. Think, Elias. What are our options?" His laugh was harsh. "Options? We could sell, run, leave this cursed land to him." He turned, eyes burning. "Is that what you want?" Sophia stood, her back straight, her voice like steel. "No. I did not flee Boston to flee Montana. I am done with running. If this land can be stolen, then it was never yours to begin with. Do you mean to tell me you've worked half your life only to hand it over to a thief? His fists clenched at his sides. Then what would you have me do? Put a bullet in him? His voice was low, dangerous. It'd be my word against his. Corpse and Sheriff Brodie would see me hang for it. Sophia met his eyes without flinching. Then not a bullet. The law. The law? Elias barked a bitter laugh. The law in this town is whatever Blackwood pays it to be. The town's law, yes, Sophia said firmly, but not the territory's. Judges travel, circuit judges who answer to no one here. Judge Morrison comes through in the spring. Less than a month away. If we bring him proof, real proof, then Blackwood cannot buy his way out. The fire in Elias's eyes dimmed into thought. He sank into the chair across from her, jaw tight. Proof. He stared at the floor. Memory, dragging him back. The day he struck me down. I wasn't alone. Billy Page was with me, my hired hand, barely 19. Blackwood's man held him at gunpoint while Blackwood swung that post. His hands curled into fists. Billy saw it all. Sophia's pulse quickened. Where is he? Elias's jaw hardened. Gone. Cleared his pay and vanished the next day. Blackwood must have spooked him or bought him off. Jedediah said the boy lit out fast and hasn't been seen since. Sophia moved behind him, her hands resting gently on his tense shoulders. Then we find him. He's our witness, our proof. He looked up at her, eyes dark and haunted. He won't want to be found, and Blackwood won't want him alive. Then, we must be more determined to find him than Blackwood is to silence him, she said simply. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Elias nodded once. The course was set. 2 days later, they rode into Redemption Gulch. The town that had once looked quaint now felt like enemy ground. Conversation stopped as they passed. Faces turned away. Fear hung heavy in the air, as tangible as dust. They went first to the station. Jedediah, once friendly, now avoided their eyes. Billy Page? Haven't seen him. Don't want to. Best to let sleeping dogs lie, Thorne. Before Elias could press, the saloon doors creaked open. Sheriff Brodie stepped out, bloated with whiskey and self-importance. His porcine eyes slid over Sophia with a leering smile. Well, well. Thorne and the missus, he drawled, thumbs hooked in his belt. Heard you've had trouble out at the ranch. Fires, fences. Shame, that. Maybe you ought to take Mr. Blackwood's offer. Would be safer for everyone. The threat was plain. Sophia felt Elias tense beside her, his hand inching toward his rifle. Before he could speak, she stepped forward, her voice crisp and cold. Thank you for your concern, Sheriff. But my husband and I are not for sale. And we are not easily frightened. Brodie's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. But he said nothing as Sophia took Elias's arm and guided him past. Her heart pounded, but her face did not waver. She would not let Blackwood, or his pet sheriff, see fear in her. As they passed the mercantile, Sophia caught sight of Martha Gable, the storekeeper's wife, watching from the doorway. Fear and pity mingled on the woman's face. Sophia's mind sharpened. She excused herself, stepping into the store with a purposeful air. Martha fidgeted behind the counter. I can't help you, she whispered before Sophia even spoke. Not my place. Sophia leaned closer, lowering her voice. Billy Page was sweet on your daughter, wasn't he? He wouldn't vanish without a word unless he was in terrible trouble. You know that. Martha's eyes welled, her maternal fear cracking her silence. She whispered quickly, He's got kin in the Garnet Range. Mining camp they call Bear's Jaw. That's all I know. Sophia squeezed her hand gently. That's enough. Thank you. When she stepped back into the street, Elias's gaze sharpened at her expression. You found something, Yes, she said, her voice calm but resolute. A trail, and we'll follow it. The mountains did not welcome them. They tested them. 2 days after leaving Redemption Gulch, Sophia and Elias rode north toward the Garnet Range. The trail narrowed into steep, twisting paths, the air sharp with pine and thin with altitude. Clouds pressed low, heavy with rain. Sophia gripped the reins tightly, her body aching from hours in the saddle. Elias rode ahead, stiff in the saddle but unyielding, his hand never straying far from his rifle. The silence between them was not cold but taut, every sound of hoof on stone a reminder that danger might lurk around the bend. On the second day, rain came hard and unrelenting. The trail turned to mud. The horses slipped, scrambling on slick rock. Then it happened. Elias's mount faltered, its hooves sliding out from under it. The animal crashed down, throwing him violently against the ground. "Elias!" Sophia was off her horse in an instant, heart in her throat. He groaned, one hand pressed to his wounded side. She dropped to her knees, her hands already tugging at his coat, terrified of fresh blood. "I'm all right," he gritted out, trying to push himself upright. His face was pale, his breathing ragged. "Just the wind knocked out. The wound pulled, that's all." Sophia checked his bandage anyway, her hands gentle but firm. Relief shuddered through her when she found no fresh bleeding. She met his gaze, her voice fierce. "You see, you can't do this alone. You need me." He looked at her, rain streaming down his face, eyes raw and unguarded. "I know," he said quietly. "I need you, more than I ever thought I would." The admission sank deep into her bones, warming her even as the storm drenched them. That night they huddled beneath a rocky overhang, sharing one blanket against the cold. The rain beat a relentless rhythm above them, and in the dark, Sophia whispered truths she had never spoken. "I was a governess in Boston," she began. "The son of the family fancied himself in love with me. When I turned him away, he lied, said I encouraged him. His mother dismissed me without a reference. No one would hire me again. My name was ruined." Her voice broke. "I came west to find a place where I could be judged by my worth, not by a lie." Elias's arm tightened around her, his voice low. "I was 16 when the fever took my parents. All I had was this land and 6 scrawny cattle. For 15 years I worked it alone. Never thought I deserved more than sweat and solitude." He paused, his breath unsteady. "It's not easier anymore." Sophia turned toward him, her face close enough to see the pain and longing in his eyes. The space between them crackled with something neither dared name. The following afternoon, the mining camp came into view, a chaotic sprawl of tents and shanties, men bent over picks, mud sucking at their boots. Bear's jaw, a place built on desperation. They asked cautious questions, drawing suspicion with every word. Finally, at the edge of a claim, they found him, Billy Page. But he was no longer the sturdy farmhand Elias remembered. He was gaunt, eyes hollow, movements jerky with fear. When he saw Elias, he dropped his pick and stumbled back, his voice breaking. "Stay away! I don't know you!" "Billy." Elias's voice cut through, urgent but steady. He raised his hands in surrender. "It's me, Elias Thorne. We're not here to harm you." The boy shook his head violently, panic choking him. "He'll kill me! Blackwood said he would, paid." Me to keep my mouth shut, said his reach was long. "You don't understand. He'll find me." Sophia dismounted, moving slowly, carefully, as one would with a frightened colt. She knelt in the mud before him, her skirts ruined, her eyes steady. "Billy, my name is Sophia. I'm Elias's wife." The words slipped out unbidden, but she did not retract them. "We know you're afraid, but living like this, hiding, running, it isn't living. Blackwood has made you his prisoner." Billy's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands trembling. "He'll kill me." Sophia reached into her satchel, pulling out her little book of Shakespeare. She opened it, her voice clear despite the rain. Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. Billy, you are dying 1,000 tiny deaths every day. We are asking you to stand once, to speak truth before a judge. One day. One act of courage. Elias stepped closer, his tone hard but not unkind. You testify, Billy. Tell Judge Morrison what you saw, and you'll have my gun and her mind to protect you. Afterward, I'll give you back your job. A home, a chance to be the man you were meant to be. Billy's eyes flicked between them. Sophia's compassion, Elias's fierce resolve. He saw not just vengeance, but justice. Not just survival, but a home. Slowly, trembling, he pushed himself upright. His voice cracked, but his words were steady. All right, I'll do it. I'll testify. That night, as they rode away with Billy, shielded between them, Sophia glanced at Elias. The boy's courage had cost him everything, but it might win them all a future. And in that moment, Sophia knew. The reckoning was no longer on the horizon. They were riding into its heart. Justice never rides in quietly. It comes with noise and blood. Redemption Gulch had never seen such a stir. Word spread fast that Judge Morrison's wagon was due, and with it came whispers of trouble. Silas Blackwood and his men lounged in the street like they owned it, pistols heavy on their hips. The sheriff puffed his chest, a puppet strung tight by Blackwood's coin. And into that storm rode Elias, Sophia, and Billy Page. The boy looked gaunt but resolute, his hands trembling on the reins. Sophia rode close beside him, her presence a shield. Elias's jaw was set like granite, his rifle tied across his saddle. Every eye in town turned as they dismounted in front of the courthouse, dust rising around their boots. Inside, Judge Morrison presided, a hard man with colder eyes, unbending in reputation. The room smelled of sweat and dust, benches packed with townsfolk hungry for spectacle. Blackwood sat smug in the front row, his lawyer beside him, his men spread through the crowd like wolves in a fold. Elias stood when called. His voice was steady, though his hand never strayed far from the table's edge. Your Honor, Silas Blackwood struck me down by the creek, left me for dead. He dammed the water, set fire to my pasture, scattered my herd. He means to ruin me, to take my land. Morrison's gaze flicked toward Blackwood. And your proof, Mr. Thorne? Elias's eyes shifted to Billy. The boy's face was pale, but he rose. His voice cracked at first, but Sophia caught his gaze, nodding encouragement. He swallowed hard and spoke. I was there. I worked for Mr. Thorne. I saw Blackwood ride up, call him a thief. I saw Dooley hold a pistol on me. I saw Blackwood lift a post and swing it. I saw him strike Mr. Thorne down. I thought he was dead. A murmur rippled through the room. Blackwood's lawyer leapt to his feet. The testimony of a runaway boy? Bought and paid for by Thorne, no doubt. Billy shook his head, desperation cutting through his fear. He gave me money, Blackwood did. $200 to keep quiet. Said he'd kill me if I ever spoke. Gasps filled the room. Morrison banged his gavel. Order! Blackwood rose slowly, a smile carved in ice. Lies! Every word of it. The sheriff will vouch for me. Ask anyone in this town who owns the creek. Everyone knows it's mine. Sheriff Brodie shifted uncomfortably, sweat slicking his forehead. For once, silence betrayed him. Morrison's eyes narrowed. I will examine the dam myself. Until then, Blackwood, you will stand down. But Blackwood never stood down. That night, as the town emptied, Sophia lit a lantern in their rented room above the mercantile. Elias sat by the window, rifle across his lap. Billy lay fitfully on a cot, fear gnawing at his sleep. Hoofbeats shattered. The quiet. A dozen riders filled the street, torches flaring. Blackwood's voice rang out, venom dripping. "Thorne! Hand over the boy, or we burn you out!" Elias's hand tightened on the rifle. He looked at Sophia, his face grim. "They'll kill him if they get him." Sophia's heart thundered. She grabbed the pistol Elias had taught her to use and stood tall. "Then they don't get him." The first torch crashed against the building's side. Flames licked the wood. Smoke curled. Billy whimpered. Elias swung the window open and fired, the crack echoing through the night. One rider toppled, torch, tumbling into the dirt. Chaos erupted. Shots fired back, glass shattering. Sophia dragged Billy toward the rear stairs, her pistol shaking in her hand. "Go, now!" They spilled into the alley, smoke choking them. Elias limped after, every step. A war against his healing wound. More riders swung around the corner, cutting them off. Sophia raised her pistol, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Stay back!" The men laughed. One spurred his horse forward. Sophia squeezed the trigger. The shot rang true. The rider reeled, his horse bolting, the others scattering in shock. Elias fired beside her, his aim deadly. Torches dropped, horses screamed, the street dissolved into chaos. But Blackwood himself remained, sitting tall in the saddle, his face a mask of fury. "You think the judge will save you?" he bellowed. "The law bends to men like me, always has, always will." Elias stepped forward, his rifle steady despite the pain in his side. His voice was raw, thunderous. "Not tonight, Blackwood, not while I still breathe." For a heartbeat, the two men stared across the firelit street, one with wealth and power, the other with nothing but grit, and a woman at his side. The balance shifted. Townsfolk, drawn by the chaos, spilled into the street. And for the first time, whispers turned not in Blackwood's favor, but against him. He dammed the creek, burned their pasture. Thorne's telling the truth. Judge Morrison himself appeared, flanked by two deputies. His voice cut through the smoke. "Enough. Blackwood, you and your men stand down or face federal charges of attempted murder and arson." The weight of authority, true authority, settled like a hammer. Blackwood's men wavered, eyes darting. One by one they lowered their weapons. Blackwood's sneer faltered, but his eyes locked on Elias. "This ain't over," he hissed, before wheeling his horse and galloping into the night. The mob dissolved. The fire was beaten back. And in the street, lit by torch embers and the fading glow of chaos, Elias turned to Sophia. "You faced them," he said, his voice rough with awe. Sophia, shaking, lowered her pistol. "We faced them." That night, with Billy safe and the town murmuring against Blackwood, Elias sat close beside Sophia in the quiet room. His hand covered hers, calloused and strong. "You've stood beside me through fever, fire, and bullets," he said softly. "This bond between us, it isn't paper. It's blood and iron. And I swear again, Sophia, I will never let you go." Her throat tightened. She saw truth in his eyes. Not duty, not pride, but devotion. And in that moment, she knew she had found her home. Not in Boston, not even in Montana's soil. Her home was Elias Thorne. The fire died, but what it left behind could not be undone. By morning, Redemption Gulch looked different. The smoke from the night's blaze still clung to the air, but so too did something new. Courage. Townsfolk who had once crossed the street to avoid Elias Thorne now nodded as he passed. Whispers carried down the boardwalks, not of his ruin, but of Blackwood's crimes. Judge Morrison made it plain. "The dam will be torn down under federal order. Witness testimony has been heard. If Blackwood so much as raises a hand again, he'll swing for it." For the first time in months, Elias breathed easier. Back at the ranch, the valley seemed changed. The creek sang louder, running free again. The cattle grazed calm in the meadow. And inside the cabin that had once smelled of blood and despair, life began to root itself in ordinary ways. Sophia rose early to fetch water, her skirts damp with dew. Elias followed with his crutch, still stiff but healing fast. When she scolded him for chopping wood too soon, he only grinned. "I'll not let you do all the heavy lifting." She shook her head, but her heart warmed. Billy, thinner but steadier, had taken to the work with determination. He mended fences, tended stock, eager to prove himself. His haunted eyes softened when Sophia set a plate before him, when Elias clapped his shoulder. Slowly, the boy who had lived in fear began to look like someone who belonged. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the ridges, Elias stood on the porch, watching Sophia. She was humming softly as she poured milk into jars, her sleeves rolled, her hair loose in the breeze. The simple sight hit him harder than any ambush. He limped forward, taking her hand in his. She looked up, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "You saved me," he said, his voice low, rough. "You fought for me. You fought with me. I promised you a roof and a patch of ground. But I owe you more than that." Sophia's throat tightened. "Elias, no," he cut in, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Listen to me. You came here as a mail-order bride, and I was half dead when you found me. But I'm alive because of you. And I don't want just a contract. I want a life with you. A real marriage. A home built together." Tears burned her eyes, but she smiled, through them. "Then let's build it." They wed in the simplest of ways. No preacher, no crowd. Just a vow spoken in the quiet of the valley, with Billy as their witness, and the mountains as their church. Elias's voice was steady, full of conviction. Sophia's was clear, full of hope, and when his lips touched hers, it was not desperation this time, but promise. A promise sealed by choice, by love, by fire. The months that followed tested them still. Storms, hard winters, the scars of Blackwood's hatred. But through each trial, they stood together. Elias no longer carried his burdens alone. Sophia no longer feared the weight of false whispers. They had chosen each other, and in that choice found strength. In Redemption Gulch, people began to speak of Elias Thorne not as a man who nearly lost his land, but as the man who had survived because a woman from Boston refused to let him die. They spoke of Sophia not as a mail-order bride, but as a wife who had turned a cabin of shadows into a home of light. And so their story became a kind of legend, a story of blood, fire, and vows that could not be broken. Because sometimes love does not arrive in gentleness. Sometimes it is forged in the harshest crucible, and once forged, it never breaks. If this story of courage and devotion touched your heart, don't let it end here. Give this video a like to show your support. Share it with someone who believes in loyalty, redemption, and true partnership. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next tale from the shadowed frontier, where hardship tests the soul and love redeems it. Stay with us on this trail. More stories of grit, grace, and the West's untold legends are coming.